Humans of 7680, if you could hear my voice, it can mean only one thing. That's right, folks. It means that lecture 3 is now in the books and ready to go. Equally a good lecture as the one before. At least I think so. I just listened to it again right before I recorded this slide, so I'm kind of liking what I'm saying and how it's going. I am hoping that it's coming across nice and clear to you, and there is that. One little note here: my microphone was acting a little bit wonky, so there may be some slides that are a little bit louder than others. Not a terrible thing, but I just thought I'd mention it for those of you that are using headphones and do not want to be scared. The picture, gotta do the picture, right? This is my younger son. This is Rafael Perez, and we are on the highest point in West Virginia, which sounds impressive, but we drove up and we had a chance to see sunset from there. Even though it was July, it was quite cold up there. So we took down some blankets and enjoyed the sunset with in a nice warm embrace. All right, folks, I'm gonna stop yapping and get started with the content here. I hope you guys are doing great. It'll be some time before you see some new content from me. It'll be a couple weeks before the next set of lectures comes out. So this definitely is going to put an end cap to that initial push. I will talk to you guys very, very soon, and hopefully we'll have a live meet, so we'll have a chance to see each other. Enjoy the video, guys. All right, good folks, let's launch this class like an Angry Bird. Remember that game, Angry Bird? That was a good game. I'm pretty sure that was like the first app that fully addicted probably all of my kids. So as we launch this class here, what did you get from your 30 minutes of reading? That's right, it was in the slide of clarity. 30 minutes, one thing that you did not know but you now know. How about one thing that you were confused about? How did that work out? Undoubtedly, I wish that I could actually listen to your answers, because I do enjoy talking to my students instead of just talking to my computer. But those are the questions I would have asked you if we were live and in person. But we are not, so give it some thought. If you do have some sort of confusion or you're not sure about something, always remember, I am an email away, davidperez11230 at AOL.com. How about my textbook? Anybody have a chance to kind of open that up and leaf through it? I would love to get some feedback on that. Let's take a look at what we're doing tonight. The goals for tonight are very much centered around one thing and one thing only. I want to finish talking about section number 1 and get you all the information that you need in order to actually start writing section number 1. So in order to do that, we have to start and finish our discussion on writing hypotheses. It's a little bit of a lengthy discussion, and it's a good time for us to get started on that. I also want to take a look at gathering some electronic resources and information through the Brooklyn College library page. And as part of that, also provide a little model for not only your anchor pieces, but also the review of literature. One last thing that I want to do tonight is I want to revisit the format for section number 1. We did an in-depth study of that format in lecture number 2. So for tonight, we'll just do a quick revisit in order to make sure that all the pieces are in place and ready for you. So without further ado, here we go. We're going to make the transition here from those keywords and phrases, and hopefully you have had some success with the try it now. But we're going to transition into developing a good pair of hypotheses that in many ways are going to work for you, and in every way will be a lens for your future writing. This slide very much is a byproduct of doing this sequence kind of over and over again. I don't know if I mentioned it in the first two lectures, but this is, I believe, my 32nd or maybe 33rd time of teaching the course. So this lecture is very much a byproduct of those dozens of times running through this. It's at this point where we begin to look towards the hypotheses and begin to kind of wrap up phase one of your research, where researchers often kind of like look at it and say, I don't know, Perez, this is pretty fuzzy. I'm not really sure I know exactly where I'm going or what I'm doing with it. And that's okay. It's supposed to be fuzzy. You've only had 3 lectures, or maybe two and a bit on this topic. So it's supposed to be a little bit fuzzy. In order to help clarify things, and very much that's the point of the next X amount of slides, is to begin to look at these hypotheses as a way to define what it is that you're hoping to measure, what it is that you're looking to solve within your classroom. We're going to be doing that by defining a variable. Now, we've all heard of what variables are, but let's get really specific and begin to understand how these variables are going to work for us. I'm almost sure that you've heard of these two types of variables before, but I find that a lot of times new researchers or young researchers have a hard time identifying which one is which. So let's go through them real quick. The ones that we're going to be looking at over the next couple slides are going to be your independent variable and your dependent variable. So let's look at independent variable first. What I did in the green box on the left hand column is I found 3 different definitions for an independent variable. It doesn't matter which one you choose, or if you choose a combination of them in order to help you understand how it's going to kind of work for you. So let's take a look at the first one. An IV, and by the way, that's usually what I call an independent variable. I just go straight to the acronym. An IV is the treatment which is given to one group. Think about that. The treatment, something that you're giving to one group within your research sample. Let's try another one. An IV is the solution to the statement of the problem. You know what the statement of the problem is. You came up with it 2 lectures ago. What's the solution that you came up with? If the solution doesn't present itself right away, that's okay, because the IV and the development of the IV is going to come up with the solution for you. I don't want to get too far into that. Let's go look at the third one. The one factor that is different from one testing group, to the next. So between those three definitions, choose one that kind of works for you. I found over the years that the middle one works for most people, but the other 2 do pitch in some bits of information that don't necessarily appear in the second one. So let's do a quick example here. Students are having a hard time relaxing while reading during reading a test passage. Okay, fine. So that's the statement of the problem. Go to the left real quick. What is the treatment for that problem? Number 2, what is the solution for that problem? Number 3, what's different? What am I going to make different from one group to another group? Well, let's take a look. Would students' test anxiety be reduced by changing the lighting? What's the IV in that? Where's the IV there? Let's take a look. I hope that shows up on the video. It should. There it is. The lighting is the one variable that we are testing. If I look at it, the lighting is going to be the solution that I've chosen in order to fix that problem statement. Start thinking now. Start thinking. How are you going to fix your problem? What are you going to institute in your classroom that's going to fix this problem that you've created? Before we change slides, you see the word by, right? We did that last week or last lecture, or in the first lecture. I'm not sure which one there anymore. Anything after the word by, chances are, is going to be your independent variable. It's in these slides that I wish I had you in front of me, because I want to make sure that you understand it, but I think that you do. I'm on your team. I got it. Okay, here we go. Let's move on to the dependent variable. So a DV is a little bit different. I only have two definitions because it's a little more clear-cut than the IV. So the DV is the result which is measured, or you could look at it and say the criterion by which you measure the effect of the IV. Now, I know that second one sounds a little more complicated, but all it's trying to say is that as you measure the results that you're actually trying to measure are what did your solution, what did your treatment, what did your IV do for the students in your classroom. Let's get a couple of quick examples here. To measure the effect of the lighting, I will measure. Well, let me think. How am I going to measure whether the lighting worked or not? Oh, well, I can measure test anxiety. I can measure test scores. I can measure test speed. I could probably measure 150 different things, and all of them will tell me whether my alternative lighting worked or didn't work. As a side note, if you'll notice in the IV slide, there was only one IV, and it very much was welded with lighting and everything associated with lighting. There was one IV. But when it comes to a dependent variable, I have multiple opportunities to measure whether that lighting worked or didn't work. I'll leave it there. Let's go to the next slide. So let's talk about how those two ideas, the IV and the DV, are applicable to your particular research. So first off, the IV and the DV were much more critical and central to the research when we were collecting data from the students. Now, obviously, for this particular semester, that's not going to apply. So we're not going to necessarily use the IV and the DV as focal points, but instead they're going to be a part of your hypotheses. And once we put them in your hypotheses, it almost creates like a stepping stone into that next stage, which is called your thesis statement. Now, we haven't gotten there yet because your thesis statement is going to be located at the very beginning of section 2, and your hypothesis I'm going to lecture on. I'm going to continue lecturing on in the next couple of slides. For now, those two hypotheses that we are creating using the IV and the DV are going to be translated into two thesis statements. You may find that as we go through the try it nows and this particular set that you have two perfect hypotheses, but for the most part, a lot of researchers tend to write hypotheses early in the process, and then as they start reading more in the literature reviews and they start writing about different articles and they get more ideas, the hypothesis starts to change a little bit, and there starts to be more of a sensitivity towards what the hypothesis is trying to say, and kind of a exclusion to ideas that maybe don't belong in the hypothesis. So that all is going to come into play as you move forward with the process of section 1. Good. You have some ideas, you have some information that you can kind of ponder. Let's get very practical, though. Let's talk about how we're going to take those research questions from last lecture and turn them into well-formatted hypotheses. 2 of them. 2. Since we're talking about practical, let's start with Webster's definition of a hypothesis. An unproven statement which the researcher, that would be you, will either prove or reject. By the way, that is the right terminology. So when you talk about a hypothesis or two hypotheses, you either prove that hypothesis or you reject it. Couple of characteristics of a good hypothesis to get your thinking to that next step here. First off, it's written in the declarative form, meaning that it is not a question. It is a statement. It is a sentence. Typically it's written in one sentence, and we are going to use that format for our class, meaning that it's going to be brief, to the point. But it's going to be written in a single sentence. There has to be a very direct connection to your research questions. The reason is because your research questions are welded in your problem statement. If you stray too far from your research questions when you're creating and designing your hypotheses, it means that your hypotheses have also strayed from your problem statement. If you keep everything in line and you use one to form the other, and that goes for the thesis statement too, which is coming up. If you use one for the other, it's impossible to get lost. So we're very much going to have that direct connection from your research questions right into your hypothesis. The fourth one usually is not a problem, but I like to mention it, and that is that your hypothesis can't just be pulled out of thin air. It has to have some sort of theory and body of knowledge to it. Your literature review will take you part of the way there as far as developing that body of knowledge. But in the back of your mind, as you're writing it, just know that you really shouldn't be kind of not making stuff up, but saying things that seem to make sense, but don't have a theory or a body of knowledge attached to it. Don't think it'll be a problem, because the review of literature will kind of take care of that for you. Let me ask you a question. What is the treatment that you're proposing in order to solve the problem statement that you originally created in lecture number 1, I believe? Hit pause for a second. Come up with anything. It doesn't matter what it is. Any concept, any type of treatment, give it a shot. I'm going to get some coffee. I'll be right back. Probably a bad idea. I am definitely over-caffeinated and undernourished. So if in the next couple of slides I start talking like I'm auctioning off something, you'll know why. Good. So you have that fuzzy kind of idea. You have something that you're thinking about that's going to solve the original problem. That, in essence, is really the beginning of a successful hypothesis. If you don't have that original concept that you're going to put forward, if you don't have that original treatment that you're going to propose, it's going to be kind of hard to completely formulate a true hypothesis. It doesn't necessarily have to stay the same as it is right now, but as long as you have that treatment that you hope to eventually institute, it's almost like it's easier to modify and change as opposed to come up with this idea later on down the road. It's one of those times where you can't necessarily kick the can down the road. It's better just to pick up that can right now, and you could always switch it up and change it and work at it through the course of the next couple of lectures. But for now, take that concept, kind of tuck it away, and let's go forward. In the first couple of lectures, I brought up the concept of academics, behavior, and attitude. I don't know if I said it at the time, but I'll say it now. There's nothing that you do in a classroom which doesn't impact one of these three things. You could think about it for a little bit. You don't have to pause, but you can. if you're giving a mini lesson, you're trying to impact the student's academics. Some sort of content, some sort of skill, some sort of strategy, all fall under the idea of academics. But then again, there's some things that you do in the classroom that very much try to affect the behavior of students. It could either be a negative behavior, an off-task behavior. It could be a positive behavior, for example, promoting on-task behavior. Finally, the last one, it could also be an attitude. You're changing the way that students think or feel about something. Those three big concepts very much come into play with your hypothesis. The reason that they come into play, the reason that they become fairly critical when writing your hypothesis, is that they begin to describe the outcome of your intervention, of your treatment. By the way, the word treatment and intervention, I use those kind of interchangeably, so don't get lost between them. I kind of mean the same thing. A treatment obviously is something that will help, that looks to solve the problem statement, and an intervention is more practical, something that you would actually use in the classroom. So those three things very much describe the outcome of that treatment, of that intervention. I wanted to mention it one more time because I want you to have those three ideas handy as we go through the model for writing a hypothesis. I know. I keep saying that we're going to write the hypothesis, and I never actually get to writing the hypothesis. Don't worry, we're going to get there. I promise. At least I hope we do. Let's talk about the format for what a hypothesis should look like. So the first thing you may or may not notice, depending if you're watching or listening, is that this list that's in front of you is not a bullet point. It's actually a checklist. So a checklist, you kind of have to check off every box in order for it to work, and that's not any different here. These four things have to be mentioned in any good, well-formatted hypothesis. So the first one is you gotta state who your population is. Who are we talking about? What grade is it? How old are they? Doesn't necessarily have to be anything very, very specific. But on the other end, the more specific that you can make it, the more legitimate your hypothesis will sound and read. What I always suggest is target the kids the students that you worked with this year. For those of you that are in high school or middle school, you could pick a particular period of the day. So let's say, for example, your second period class on Mondays is algebra. Let's say ninth grade algebra 1. So that would be your target population, and it's fairly specific. So that's check number one. Check number two is you have to mention your proposed intervention. You don't have to talk a lot about it. You have to, though, give it a title. You have to give it a name. You have to define it in some sort of way. Box number 3 is going to mention the content and the measuring tool, which you hope to measure the effect of the intervention. So if you go back a couple slides, the box number 2 is your IV. Your box number 3 is your dependent variable. How are you going to measure this? And then finally, box number 4 is going to be the comparison group. Let's take a look at how this all works in an actual model. Geez, Perez, it took you long enough to get to the model. I swear, guys, there's a method to my madness. I swear. Let's take a look at the actual model that will put the checklist to the test here. I included the research question that kind of spawned the hypothesis. I wanted you to see how one led to another. So let's take a look at the first one, the research question. Will students improve their overall testing scores by receiving a comprehensive and unified testing program? Remember the word by. It is there. After the word by, remember what's supposed to be there? Yeah, that's right. The independent variable is supposed to be there. So let's take a look at how that kind of is distilled into the hypothesis. Third grade students receiving the experimental test preparation program will score higher on ELA standardized examinations than students who receive a traditional program. It's there. It's just proposed in a different fashion. Let's break down the hypothesis further, okay? Let's get colorful here. So on this slide, you have the hypothesis at the top, and then you have the checklist at the very, very bottom. So let's start at the top there. You have the target population, which is third grade students. And then there's the IV, there's the treatment, there is the intervention. I don't know if there's any other synonyms I could use for that, which is the experimental test preparation program, and that is my proposed intervention. Keep in mind, I'm not talking about the intervention, I'm not getting into it, I'm not writing about it. All I'm saying is that it's going to be an experimental test preparation program. Nice, simple, to the point. Go to the next one. ELA standardized examinations. It gives the content and the measuring tool. And then finally, the comparison group for this one are students that receive no such program. And you can see all those little boxes are checked off in one single kind of unified sentence. That sentence obviously being your hypothesis. Let's take a look at model número 2. There will be no fancy colors on this slide, but you'll get the message. So the research question is up top. Will a student's reading abilities increase by providing alternative classroom lighting? Let's go through the drill again. After the word by is good. That's right. Your intervention or your treatment. So let's take a look at how that translates into a hypothesis. Students attending a 6th grade class, there's the population, self-contained ELA class, who have a choice of lighting, will read more pages in a 30-minute independent reading period as measured by running records, and then the opposite, than students taught with traditional classroom lighting. And there it is. Nice, simple, easy, ready to go. If you'll notice, both the models, the outcome of the alternative lighting and the test preparation program, both have academic outcomes. But I could very easily have swapped out a behavioral outcome, meaning that maybe it's not going to be more pages read, maybe it's going to be better engagement or longer engagement. It could be something of an attitudinal measure where you could turn around and say we'll enjoy independent reading more than students that don't have the traditional lighting. The point is that both hypotheses don't only have to be academic in nature. You could vary it a little bit with a behavioral or a attitudinal outcome. I'm going to go so far as to say that you probably should vary it a little bit, and I'll tell you why. Because the hypotheses are going to be translated into thesis statements, and your thesis statement is going to be what you're trying to prove or disprove, if you put something with behavior and attitude along with the academic, all of a sudden now you have kind of more to write about. You have more material to include within your sections. I keep saying it in every single lecture, but I'll say it again in this slide. It's all about providing yourself with different choices, because there's nothing harder than writing about something that you feel is kind of repetitive and monotonous. If you bring in the behavior and the attitude along with the academics, you have more to go with. That's an option. If you want to do two academic hypotheses with two academic thesis statements, by all means, it's legitimate and it will definitely work. My suggestion, though, is that you're going to mix and match to some degree. All right, let's wrap up this sequence on hypotheses with try it now. So your goal for this try it now is going to be to take those research questions, take the keywords, take the statement of the problem, take everything that we've kind of spoken about that you've been thinking about, and now go ahead and just write it. You have all the tools that you need to write it. Go ahead and put that. Go ahead and put pen to paper, and make it happen. Don't forget your checklist. Make sure that as you're writing it, you're checking off all those boxes. I did include that bullet point there, that second one towards the bottom, to vary your academic behavior and attitude. I didn't have it there until I started talking in the last slide, and then once I realized that that I had included, I figured let me memorialize it in this slide. And whatever you do here with your two hypotheses, you're going to cut and paste right into your section 1. All right, folks, we're going to begin the process of learning how to gather electronic resources from the Brooklyn College Library. But there's a couple things that I want you to note before we move on here. First off, this process that I'm going to show you of downloading scholarly articles from EBSCO or ProQuest is going to be for both your literature review, which is in section number 2, but it's also going to matter for the end of section number 1, your subheading number 5, which is your anchor articles. So both are going to be gathered and written in the same way. I think I mentioned it in a couple slides from now, but I'll mention it here. I'll mention it here again. The actual demonstration, the actual demo videos, I couldn't put them in this particular video, and I explain why in a couple slides. But just so you could hear it as well. If you want to access those videos, those are going to have their own uploads on Google Classroom. So you'll see there's going to be 2 of them. And once you get to that point where it says demo on a slide, or whenever you're good and ready, really, to go ahead and access those videos, you can go ahead and do that through Google Classroom. So before we jump into the demo and the little twist that I spoke about in the last slide, let's talk about what makes a good article, or I should say, what makes an article worthy for it to be chosen for your literature review. So just starting from the top and kind of going downwards, the article that you're going to choose to some degree has to tell you something about your topic. Excuse me, that you don't know. Something that's novel, something that's different, something that's interesting to you. We're all smart people. We all know a lot of stuff about education and about pedagogy and everything related to our classrooms. So the article can't just be basic things. For example, The Reading Teacher is a publication that's written by teachers for teachers, and they're cute little articles, and a lot of them are good reading for quiet afternoon or whatever. So one of the things I notice about those particular articles is that a lot of the stuff that I read in that particular publication is stuff that I kind of already know. It's not something that's maybe in the forefront of my thinking at all times, but it's stuff that when I read about it, I don't tend to ponder what it is that they're saying. It's more just has more entertainment value than research value. So one of the things that a good article will do off the bat is it's going to engage you intellectually, as opposed to just simply entertaining you with very basic facts. It should have some sort of substance to it. Beyond that, if you notice that the article shares a common problem statement, if you notice that maybe the solution or the treatment or the intervention, all those synonyms that we've been using this lecture, if the article has some of those, you know what? It's probably a good article that you could certainly explore. The last one doesn't apply to you, but I left it in there just for education's sake. Sometimes a good article will have a very similar methodology, meaning that the way that they propose their research be done is kind of similar to the way that you're proposing it. Now, obviously, I don't know if you're going to necessarily come across any articles that are proposing something similar to you at this juncture, but I'll leave it in there just in case. This is by no means an exhaustive list. There's just a ton of things that would make a good make an article good for you and for your lit review. If you ask me, if it engages me intellectually and makes me think and stimulates me to kind of wonder about other parts of my research, chances are that's something that I want to hold on to. Now, all of those bullet points that we just did in the last slide, all of them don't have to be present in an article in order for you to choose it. In fact, it could just be one of them, one of the bullet points or two of the bullet points, but yet you feel that there's a very strong connection to your research, your personal research. This is important, and I'll tell you why. Because a big part of the literature review is going to ask you to connect what you've read to what it is that you're doing. If you have that connection already available from the beginning, from the initial reading of it, it makes your writing that much easier to perform. So have that in mind. If you have that connection, hold on to it. Be able to describe it, be able to write to it, and then take it with you into your writing for the lit review. Let's talk about the demo real quick. Oh yeah, I went there. The title of this slide is an old school emoji. So I'm going to sound like my father here real quick, and I'm going to tell you that when I was growing up, we didn't have emojis. We actually had to sit there and make our own emojis. In this case, it's a sad face emoji, because despite my sincerest efforts, I couldn't figure out how to insert a video, meaning a screen recording of me using the BC library into this video, which you're watching now. And Lord knows I spent hours trying to find different ways of doing it. So, I kind of went old school, like my emoji, like my sad face emoji. What I did was I had an old video. I had an old video that I had recorded for a different class, and I think at the time I had to miss the class for whatever reason. So instead of just canceling class, I put it on YouTube. So this was back in 2018, so it's not that old, and nothing has changed since then. So it is a little bit of an older video. It will give you an idea of how to go onto BC Library. It's a little bit of a lengthy video because it had to stand alone. So I kind of stretched it out a little bit. So it's about half an hour. It actually really is. I actually looked at it before recording this slide, at least some parts of it. It is very detailed and very comprehensive. So if you do want to get an idea of what I consider to be the most effective way of getting research articles from EBSCO and ProQuest, that is the video for you. You may want to kind of skip through it a little bit just to get the pieces that you want and that you need. I'm not going to call that supplemental link video number 4 because people will get confused between that and lecture number 4. I'll just give it some other name, probably supplemental link to lecture 3, which this is, and we'll kind of go from there. Sad face. I like figuring things out. Because I am a highly effective teacher and professor for that matter. What I did was I took all the different kind of bullet points from that half an hour lecture, the supplemental video, and I put it onto one slide. If you've seen any part of the video and you kind of skim through it a little bit, this demo will help you. If you're just looking at it on its own without watching the other video, I'm not sure how effective it will be, but between the two, I think it will. I think it'll certainly help you manage It'll certainly help you manage the task that you have to do in order to get your five articles from somewhere online. We are going to head into this try it now, which means that your demo is over. If you've seen the video, awesome. If you haven't, go check it out. It will also be my last slide for the evening because the caffeine has finally kicked out and the hunger has kicked in. Your try it now is 5 articles. You gotta get the 5 articles. There's kind of no other way around it. Remember that some of the articles will have the characteristics mentioned in the other slides. Bullet point number 3 is an interesting one. I don't know how much I could explain it right now, but I'm going to throw it out there. See how it sits with you. You're going to come across two different types of articles. You're going to come across informational articles, and you're also going to come across research articles. Research articles, you'll know that they're research based because they have some sort of intervention, they have data, they have results. Whereas informational articles is basically a well-written article that only has non-researched information, good information, stuff that you can certainly use. What I'd like for you to do is try to find a mixture of both with your 5. The right way of doing it is to find only research articles, but I know that's really not realistic, especially during the summer. So see if you could find a little mix of both. 3 informational, 2 research would be a good number. And it's good for you to learn how to read not only the informational article but also the research article. Most of the times I'd say try it now or don't try it now. I'll never know. I would say try this now. There's a certain muscle memory that gets developed when you go on to EBSCO or ProQuest, the way the model had shown you, and where to click, how to go about those processes. So I would definitely suggest the try it now. I am out of here. Have a great evening. I will see you on the next slide, hopefully very, very shortly. So as we look to wrapping up this lecture and wrapping up the information that you need to write section 1, I wanted to give you a couple of models for actually writing up the literature review. Now that you know, hopefully, how to find the articles online through the BC Library, I want to kind of show you how some of the different ideas of how you could write up these articles in the easiest and most effective way. I just love when I say in the slide before what I have in the slide afterwards. So yeah, the next set of slides are going to help you have a well-organized literature review. And please remember, the model is for all five write-ups that you're going to be responsible for. You're going to have five write-ups. I'm not going to spend too much time on this particular slide. This is a repeated slide from lecture number 2 when I was going over the format for section 1. This was subheading number 5. If you remember, subheading 1 through 4 had different ideas and different intentions. If you're not sure about subheadings 1 through 4, please go back and take a look at lecture number 2. So this is going to be subheading number 5, and this is the last subheading for section 1. I'll let you kind of read that on your own because it is a bit of a repeat. Off the bat, this is another checklist, not bullet points. It's a checklist. You can even take a look at this. You can even look at this checklist and say each one of these points could very much match 1, 2, maybe 3 sentences within your write-up. I like to give you a systematic approach for how to do these small tasks, because I often find that a repeated task is much faster than doing an asynchronous task. So if you can get into the mode of going through this checklist, whether it's this or the hypotheses, if you could do it over and over again, in essence, not only do you learn how to do it really, really well, but it tends to go a lot faster than if you do, individual parts. So let's take a look at each one of these in a little more depth. First off, at the very, very top, you're going to get two different models. One is going to be for an experimental, which is this one. So an experimental research synopsis or write-up is for an article that has research done as part of the article. If you remember, there was 2 types of articles. One is experimental or research based, and the other one is going to be information based. So this is the experimental one. Let's take a look. So the first box. You have to connect to something before it, either a previous article or something that you've said earlier. It's when you begin a write-up by connecting to something beforehand, it gives the reader an idea of where we came from, and by definition where we're going to go. One sentence will absolutely cover that. Another thing that it does for you is if you don't have that connection, if you don't have that link between the 2 articles, your articles begin to sound very robotic, one after the other, and we don't want that. We kind of want it to flow. We want it to have like an engaging feel to it. So definitely make that connection. Cite article correctly. I have I do have some slides at the end of this of how to cite articles correctly. There's really only 2 that you're really probably going to be using, maybe 3. But we'll talk about those at the end. So one of the places that you could cite the article correctly is at the beginning of your write-up. If you kind of like pan down to the very, very bottom, you'll see cite correctly again. You don't have to cite twice. You have the option of either citing at the beginning of your write-up or at the end of your write-up, not both. All you have to do is one. Hold on, let me get that. So I have a rule. If I'm more than 2 minutes into a slide and something interrupts it, there's no way I'm starting again. But on a positive note, I have pre-qualified for a mortgage because that's what the phone call was. One thing about the pandemic is that the cold calls have magically vanished. I guess they're with the reopening of the economy, they're back at it here. Even though in New York we are still on lockdown. Anyway, back at it here. So cite article correctly. You have your choices. Okay, good. Next one, a specific aspect of your topic. Remember when I said that an article that you choose, in all likelihood, is not going to be, perfectly aligned with what it is that you're reading in the article. So, what aspect of your topic is the article covering? Sample and population. Remember, this is an experiment that they did, so they will have a sample and population. Hopefully that sample and population will kind of match yours. It won't always. And one of the questions I often get asked is, Perez, the article is for early elementary school, but my sample is going to be high school, let's say. Can I use it? And the short answer is yes. You can use it, as long as you're able to explain the kind of like the connection between the two. So sometimes good pedagogy is good pedagogy, whether it's, elementary school, high school, or college. It doesn't necessarily matter. But eventually, when you get down to the red one down there, the connection, you will have to kind of explain it away. The next bullet point is the intervention that they used, meaning what was the experiment about? Like what was the what was it that they actually used in order to solve the problem statement? And then finally, you can get into the results. The area that I'm most interested in reading about is the connection to your research. It really should be the like out of the ratio of writing between all those boxes and the whole, the connection should have the most amount of real estate in your writing. You have to make that connection as explicit and as clear as possible in order for me or the reader or anybody else who picks up your paper to understand why you've chosen this article and why you're presenting it. Don't go crazy. Just say, why did you choose this article? It seems really, really easy, but for some reason, young research writers have a hard time with that connection. It's not a lot of writing that this requires, but that particular section will require a little bit of thought. And then again, you have the last box, which is cite correctly at the end or at the beginning. So let's take a look at an actual model. I'm not going to read the entire model to you, and as a matter of fact, I honestly don't even really care about the content. I more want you to see how the author went ahead and put all the different pieces into a nice write-up. So this particular model has 2 paragraphs. The next one will have a single paragraph, but this one has 2. And let's go through them. So let's get some color here. You can see that the first citation is the first option, where you could cite at the very beginning of your write-up, and that is an example of how to cite at the beginning, which is the author's names along with the year in parentheses. Moving right along, what type of students were they looking at? They were looking at students with ASD and also typically developing children. I'm going to skip down. One more point there. It was 62 preschool age children. Don't forget to put their grade or their age, something to that degree, just so you can get an idea. I'm only highlighting some of the little, kind of key points there. If you'll notice, there's other writing that revolves around it, just to kind of fill in the blanks. So I'm not going to read each one of them, but just so you can see how it pans out. What were they using? What was their intervention? In this case, they were using the Winnie Dunn's sensory profile. I'm not even really sure what that is. It doesn't really matter, but you know that they were using that as part of their intervention. You could already start to see how that checklist, just tick 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 check check, write in the sentences. Kind of piece in the blanks in between them. And let's take a look at that second paragraph. This one will have some bigger chunks of highlights here, and you can see in the top half of the model that the results were definitely mentioned and demonstrated. And then for me, the biggest key there is how it relates to my research. In this case, the researcher, just because I remember who wrote this, and she was a very talented researcher. I think she was several years ago in one of my classes. So she was doing a research project on multisensory education for students on the autistic spectrum disorder, ASD, and part of her writing was to show that sensory processing not only is difficult for students on the spectrum, but also that there's different sensory remedies that maybe we haven't explored yet. And of course, she went on to explore that sensory diet for her students. That was the connection for her. As far as real estate, you can see that the connection takes up a good part of that second paragraph, and she dedicates a good 2 or 3 sentences just to really make sure that the reader understands what that connection is. Last but certainly not least, you have a different way of citing the work, which is at the very end, and this one looks a little bit different. The authors are on the inside of the parentheses, separated by a comma, and then the year. Remember, you're going to choose one of those ways of citing, not both, please. That is it as far as the experimental. Let's look at the instructional, informational article. So I think this is the one that you're going to be mostly working within. Hopefully you will have the opportunity to write up a couple of research-based articles, but I have a feeling for the most part, many of your articles are going to be informational in nature. So let's take a look at this this checklist. So it starts off the same, where you're going to connect to the previous article, because you can't have that robotic type of literature review. They have to kind of flow together. And again, you'll have that cite article correctly both at the beginning or at the end. That's not going to change. Also, that's not going to change what aspect of your topic is this article discussing. Chances are the article is not going to be discussing every single part of your topic. So choose the one choose the aspect of your article, choose the aspect of your research that the article is most closely related to. So these middle two, important details and extension, are where it's going to deviate from the research-based articles. And the important details and the extension they kind of go hand in hand. And what it means to say is that beyond just a basic type of information regarding your topic, or regarding the aspect that you're covering with this article, what else is there? What's new? What's novel? What have you learned that you can take from what you have said previously and now extend it further in order to add depth to your learning? And then, of course, by extension, you're adding depth to the reader's information that they're receiving. There's a lot that you could do there. There's a little bit of flexibility, but I would spend some time on those boxes, just to make sure that you're getting a good bit of information there. That connection also will not change, even though you have a lot of good details and you have a lot of good information. How does it relate to your research specifically? How does it impact your research, and to what degree? So that will not change. And then, of course, you have the site at the end. Let's take a look at a real life model. For this model, I condensed it into a single paragraph, just for time's sake. I do think that 2-paragraph write-up actually works better than the 1 paragraph. And at face value, you're going to say, I'm not writing an extra paragraph if I don't have to. But to some degree, it's a lot easier sometimes it's easier to get the information over a longer stretch than it is to try to squeeze it all into a single dense paragraph. So you definitely want to make those paragraphs nice and short. Anyway, I did the 1-paragraph variety here just to save some time, and you can kind of see the color coding just a little bit. You have that citation to begin with. You have the specific aspect that the article is covering, that is similar to your own. You have the information that's particular for you, and then finally in red you have that strong connection. You could see that this is the same. This is the same author, meaning that we're still talking about the sensory and the students with that have been diagnosed with ASD. So that kind of you'll see that theme very much continue here. Those past two models were in some ways very rudimentary, meaning that they were one model, one write-up for one author. I wonder though, I should say I wondered in the past, is there a way to write a effective write-up, a synopsis for your literature review, but instead of just doing a single article for every write-up, if we can now begin to mix and match and blend in multiple articles into a single write-up. I call that integrated writing. I'm sure I didn't invent that, but I haven't seen it necessarily mentioned anywhere else. So I kind of gave it a title. Let's take a look at some information, then we'll look at a model at the end of it. So one of the things that I found difficult about this idea about integrated writing is that students were often asking me, how do I link the articles, or how do I know that 2 or 3 articles kind of go together? So this is my slide attempting to answer that question. If you have a couple of articles, 2 or more articles, and they have a similar concept or idea that you find interesting, or you find engaging, or that you could learn something from, that's probably the best way to choose 2 articles and kind of bring them together. If 2 articles or 3 articles have a very similar finding, it's also a very effective way of choosing the 2 articles and writing to those findings. Methodology and the way that they went about doing their research can get a little bit tricky. So you may want to leave that out for now, but just in case, if you do find 2 research articles that share a similar methodology, it's something that you definitely can mention as part of your writing. Not an exhaustive list again. If there's any other kind of connection that you can think of and you can explain it in your writing, by all means go with it and run with it. Over the years, I do have to say though, I find when students are able to integrate their writing between several authors, it very much adds a level of interest that when it's one write-up, one author, it just doesn't hold. That being said, though, one author, one write-up is the easiest way of doing it, and if that's the way that you're choosing to do it, you're not going to be penalized on points or anything like that. You may want to try it this way just to explore different ways of doing things. This is about like learning and stuff. I wanted to give you a very quick, simple system with the checklist, the same way as I did the others. This one is a lot more rudimentary. The other ones, the same way that the other ones you have to cite and all that good stuff, that all holds true. But I wanted to show you these in addition to the other bullet points. You're definitely going to talk about what the articles have in common. You could also extend and add details about that common information. So if one author has a certain set of details and then the second one extends those details, that's a really nice way of putting that information kind of back to back. And then instead of doing the commonalities, which you start off with, you could even get into some divergent pieces of research that maybe that they don't necessarily have those in common. However you go about doing that integrated writing, though, please, the one thing that you cannot forget is the connection to your research. I know I keep harping on it, and I keep saying it over and over again, but you'll be surprised how a very well written and very well formulated literature review just goes awry when the connections are not established. It just becomes very it just becomes very, very detached from the context with which you're hoping to with which you're hoping to create. So in this model, you have the three colors which represent the three different sections, and I'll let you read this on your own, only because I see that I'm going on an hour and 15 minutes, so I do want to wrap this up here. The one thing I will point out is that you'll notice that the citations are a little bit different, meaning that there's multiple citations for each individual paragraph. By the way, let me see if I can get this. I didn't realize this at the time, but this young lady, Professor Steinberg, actually taught at Brooklyn College. She hired me way back 15 years ago. So it was kind of funny that this popped up in one of my students' research papers, and it wasn't until I was looking at the actual article, because I had recognized the name, that I realized that it was Shirley Steinberg, which was kind of cool. Another thing to note is that this is a different author. At the time that the first author was writing, I hadn't made integrated writing a part of my lecture. So it is a different author, but it does demonstrate a lot of what it is that you do need to have with the integrative writing model. Like I said, try it, give it a shot. Worst comes to worst, you start it and then you abandon it. But you're all smart people, you'll be able to breeze through. So we've been talking about the citation page. I think I'm gonna have to do another. I think I'm gonna have to do another set of citation slides, but I'm just gonna do these real quick just so you have it in mind. I also wanted to put it here. A lot of times citations are easiest when you're in the middle of doing your literature review. If you leave it towards the end, it just gets harder. It just gets harder and harder, and there are points associated with the citation page. So I'll show you here now, and then maybe we'll do it again, towards the middle of the lecture sequence. Another thing, on that other video, on the supplemental video that shows you how to use ProQuest EBSCO, I'm almost positive, and I didn't see it. I'll have to verify it, but there is a function, certainly within ProQuest, where you could when you choose an article, that it allows you to make the citation in the correct format already. So if you're not sure about the way that these slides look, you may want to visit that supplemental video to see how it's done through ProQuest. For me, it's a lot easier to do it through ProQuest, but some of you may choose to do it this way. So let's take a look at a quick model here, and first off the bat, you'll notice that the last name goes first with the first initial. Your citation page, which will be at least five articles long, maybe a little bit more, should be in alphabetical order. A couple more things. You'll notice that the title of the the title of the article is going to be all in lowercase. The only exception is going to be right in the middle where that colon is. So for some reason, research articles do tend to have a lot of colons in them. So anything after the colon, the first word is going to be capitalized, but everything else is in lowercase, followed by a period at the end. The name of the journal is going to be italicized, and then the volume and then the page number are the volume is italicized and the page number is not. I don't know who comes up with these crazy rules, but that's the way the APA format is made. You'll also notice that the first line is indented all the way to the left, and then each subsequent line is indented a little bit to the right. We call that a hanging indent. I want to show you how to do it in Microsoft Word, but without that screen share, I'm not sure exactly how to show it to you. Maybe in the next lecture or the lecture after, I'll show you some screenshots just to get a little demo out on how to do that. As far as that website there, it's called the Owl at Purdue. Purdue, I believe, it refers to Purdue University, not the chicken. So if you Google the Owl at Purdue, you'll see a pop up first. That is an active link, so you could just also click on that, and it basically has everything that you want to know about APA citation. Everything from in-text to citation pages to using quotes, which I'm sure some of you will choose to do. So definitely look at that for any APA questions. A lot of times when I'm correcting papers, especially the first one, I will make some general APA notes for you. But I'm hoping that if you do access the website, it'll answer 90% of your questions. Speaking of section number 1, it is high time that we get to the format for your assignment number 1. Let's take a look. With this revisit, you'll notice that I took all the different subheadings. I just simply put it on a single slide. If you haven't had a chance to see the entire presentation of this format in lecture number 2, I certainly invite you to go there if you want a more detailed explanation of each one of these. For now, if we take a look at subheading number 1 and 2 and part of 3 and then 4, you'll notice that all those have been covered in the previous lecture. The ones that we did today are going to be in subheading number 3, your hypotheses, and subheading number 5, which is going to be your anchor articles. Hypotheses, I think, are pretty well covered in previous slides in this lecture, but I do want to have one more slide and spend just a little more time on these anchor articles. Let's do that right now. So the basics here are the 3 scholarly articles that you've chosen, and I think take a look at it like this, or look at it like this. The anchor articles are articles that are kind of utmost importance to you. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be the entire article that matches your research or your research ideas, but it could be the kind of like real pertinent and good information, things that the reader kind of has to know before moving on. In that sense, the writing, last bullet point there, the writing does match the models that I showed you in the past couple slides. So the writing is not going to change. The only thing that you may want to add is a little more detail to get to maybe a 2-paragraph write-up for your anchor articles. So in that sense, they are very similar to your literature review, which we'll talk about more in the next batch of slides that come out in a little while. So it's not so much about the writing of it, that remains consistent and the same. It's more about why you chose it and the reasons that you chose it that make them an anchor article as opposed to just a regular article. And that's kind of it for now. After this slide, after I kind of click on the next slide and we start wrapping it up, you really kind of have everything that you need in order to write section number 1. You know what? Maybe we'll talk about that on the last slide. So here we go. Wrap it up, Perez. Wrap it up. So let's end off tonight with a golden slide of clarity. Keep in mind, it's not a regular slide of clarity. It is a golden slide of clarity. The reason that there is gold involved here is because that if everything has gone according to plan, This will conclude your first upload, your first series of uploaded lectures. So I definitely hope you enjoyed them and that they were productive. You also have everything that you need in order to write section number 1. You may not necessarily be ready to write section 1, but you do have the information that you need in order to write section number 1. That, along with a live meet and maybe some email support if needed, there's no reason why you shouldn't get started as soon as possible. The due date for section number 1 is going to be October 4th, and it's still 6 weeks away. But keep in mind that even though it is 6 weeks away, it's still very much around the corner. Yes, I do plan on having a live meet sometime in early to mid-September. The idea with that live meet is going to be that you have a chance to do some work and get some lecture under your belt and kind of get it ready to go, and then we'll have a live meet to answer some direct questions. So we'll give it some time for that to happen, and I'll let you know through Google Classroom. And in the meantime, whatever you need, I am here as much as you need me to be here. David Perez 11230 at AOL. If you need some live help, I am also a teleconference away. Guys, you take care of yourselves, and I will see you, well, I guess in a couple of weeks when the next set of lectures comes out. Take care, all.